There's this girl at my high school. She she was perfect. Her deep blue eyes always had an innocent glint to them, and her lips always curled upwards in a beautiful smile. She always helped anyone in need. When she walks as if the earth will crumble if she presses against it any harder. I loved her. I wanted to fess it up, but I don't think she was even aware of my existence. And I've led a miserable life since my parents' separation when I was 9. My mom was negligent and introduced me to drugs. I'm sober now, but I feel withdrawal symptoms now and then. I'm a good student, above average, but nothing too special to note. Not a jock, not a nerd, not a bully, not bullied, just enough to be invisible. So I started following her. Each day, from what I learned about her, she was very punctual, and she was always surrounded. I mean always. There would be many people around near her house, and sometimes they even get violent and try to injure her. But the others stopped them from hurting her. But I noticed some other things that were weird. For instance, her neighborhood was eerily quiet. Only a few people walked down there, except, of course, her other worshippers, who I assume want to stay near her most of the time. I don't think would have seen her parents or guardians in the 2 years I've been following her. Also, every one of her worshippers seems desperate to be with her. From the day I saw her, I couldn't resist her charisma. After all, she was funny, sensitive, and amiable. What's not to like in that, but I think I got too carried away. I've gathered her interests, hobbies, favorite films, and music, and practically forced myself to like them. She watches documentaries, and she's got a thing with paintings of the most obscure artists. I like Rachmaninoff and Beethoven's art, but I wasn't too fond of Mozart's vibe. After 2 years, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. It was biology, the only subject I did poorly at. The professor always speaks in a monotone with a few sharp changes in tone now and then. Whenever I'm in his class, I feel like I'm in a trance, the kind of feeling you get when you're in an elevator, but compounded. It's at the edge of deep sleep, but then suddenly you're jolted awake. I was so deep in my reverie that I didn't notice that the professor had walked out. It was recess. I walked straight towards Ava, spellbound. It felt like we were meant to be. There was a gravitating effect that was tied to her. Maybe all those worshippers do have a point. She's magnetic. I was lost in my thoughts when I absent-mindedly brushed past her. I turned back when I realized my mistake. I didn't have to initiate the conversation. Hi, would you like to come for dinner tomorrow at 7 at Gary's? Quite literally froze. I couldn't speak for a second until I gathered myself and replied weakly, Yeah, sure thing. Cool, she said nonchalantly, and turned away and joined her large friend group, which was entirely different from the month before. But I didn't really care because by then, I knew she was always with different people. I felt a wave of shock as she left. My spine went cold and I was getting chills. I was anxious to meet her, and when I finally did, she asked me out. Of all people, me? It seemed too good to be true. That night when I returned to my room and started replaying the scene, my reptilian brain kicked in. Something told me not to meet her, that it would be my last night alive if I went to that dinner. Maybe it was my guilty conscience about stalking her for 2 years straight, and the fear that she might be aware of it, the fear of being called a weirdo. The thoughts were too obtrusive. I couldn't handle all this. I felt a sudden sense of withdrawal that I could have suppressed under normal circumstances, but I didn't have the willpower to do so. I know I shouldn't have, but I snorted a tenth of morphine to calm my nerves. Or two. Well, I admit, I lost count of how much, but by then the thoughts eased, and I slowly started to drowse. It was afternoon before I knew it. I slept for about 18 hours. My body felt numb, my hands were clammy, and my vision blurred. I forced myself up. I couldn't feel my legs, and I fell on all fours. I felt a sharp pain in my spine radiating through my body. Did I overdose? Possibly. I just injected naloxone, which I kept handy on my table yesterday. I laid down on my bed again and passed out for another couple of hours. I wasn't really better when I woke up. I was still sore when that feeling returned. The dread of meeting her, by this time, had compounded. It seemed that each fiber of my being refused to go out with her. I tried hard to stop those thoughts and started to get ready for the date I'd been waiting so long for. It was 7:15, and I was at Gary's restaurant. It's a modest place with a vintage vibe, something Ava seems to like. Since 1982, the restaurant banner says. The place had a popcorn ceiling and an old jukebox. Sorry, an ancient jukebox that played Jackson Pollock and other artists from the early 20th century that I couldn't even name. I waited for what seemed like forever. Then suddenly, 5 minutes before 7, that feeling came again. I felt lightheaded and I was shaking. It must have been the naloxone. I had a sudden urge to retch, and I went to the lavatory to do just that. It was about 7 by the time I returned. She was sitting where I just sat with a huge grin, a bit wider and more cheerful than usual, in a beautiful navy blue dress that complements her expressive eyes. My heart pounded this time. I wasn't sure if it was because of the naloxone or my happiness, and at that moment, I couldn't care less. Any doubt that I had previously about us just disappeared. A sense of warmth went through my body, and the soreness from the overdose vanished. "James?" she called out to me in the sweetest and most gentle tone. Does she know my name? Does she know that I've been stalking her? But I couldn't worry about anything. Not near her. She radiated a soothing vibe, as if all the things bothered me had vanished by mere presence. The soreness in my body disappeared. I don't remember the last time someone spoke with me this kindly. We had a lot more in common than I thought. She was knowledgeable and wise. I had the best and the most productive conversation I've had in ages. But the one thing that set us apart was smiling. I don't smile at all, while she always has a smile plastered on her face at all times. I mean, there are degrees of her smile, but there's always a smile. It was about midnight, and Gary's was about to close, so we decided to go to her house. Her house was really modern on the inside, and she even had a new Nokia 1101, but still, the house felt empty. There's a lot of furniture, pictures, and stuff, but it doesn't feel like anyone is living there. I couldn't bear it any longer, so I blurted out, "Ava, where are your parents?" "They don't live here. They used to live in Scandinavia." "Which part of Scandinavia?" "Oh, sorry, Denmark. They say it's peaceful there and want me to move in with them, but I like it here." Satisfied, we sat on the couch holding hands and watching a documentary that was actually very interesting. After we got tired, we slept next to each other. Before you ask, no, we didn't really do anything of that sort. We both had an unspoken feeling that it just felt wrong for us to elope. But I lay awake the whole night because of the knocking on the doors. The worshippers. They were there when we came home and still hadn't left. I didn't know that they stayed all night. She didn't seem bothered by that. I think she must have become used to it. The next day, by the time it was morning, her worshippers had left. We went to school, and I was stunned to find her all by herself and without her friends. When I asked her about it, she replied that no one ever stayed friends with her for long periods, and wanted to be alone for a while. Away from all of them. That explains the changing friend groups and worshippers. But I think I see a glint of sadness in her eyes, beneath the smile, which had me worried about her. When I left her to go to my home, I felt a sickening dread cross me once more. I wanted to be with her. I wanted to experience that happiness I felt with her, but at the same time, I felt sore once more, just as I'd felt that day at the restaurant before meeting her. I went to her home because I couldn't bear that feeling anymore. I noticed that her worshippers weren't there too, which seemed strange, but I couldn't be bothered by it. All I could think of was her, and I was afraid I was addicted to her. I felt this way before, with drugs. I know it sounds weird, but I really was addicted to her. Maybe it was because no one I've ever spoken with actually seemed to care about me. She replaced the void inside of me that had been eating me alive. I knocked on the door, and she answered the door immediately, as though she were waiting for me to arrive. I knowingly smiled back at her. I smiled. For the first time in a few years, I couldn't control my smile or stop it. She invited me in, but as I walked past the hallway, I caught a glimpse of her face that startled me. She wasn't smiling like her usual self. Did I upset her? What do I do now? The warmth that I felt around her was still there, but it was getting weaker by the minute. She seated me on the couch while conjuring up a tiny smile, and I was too startled to say anything. Something in her demeanor had changed, while still captivating. She was radiating terror instead of the warmth. Her dark blue eyes were hazel now. I was in a haze to find a reason to rationalize it. James, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have come anywhere near me. It's your fault. What? Before I could complete my question, there was a sharp pain in my gut, as if a red-hot iron bar had gone right through my chest. After a few seconds, the pain had vanished. I stood up from the couch and felt a warm liquid flowing through my stomach. My hand instinctively reached my right abdomen. Blood. I didn't see her carrying the knife she held in her hand. It stained the white tee I was wearing. The moment I saw the blood, all the pain returned to me. I was scared. I wanted to contemplate my choices and think about how different my life would have been if I stopped myself from choosing terribly. Maybe I could have avoided this, but my mind was in a blur and my vision turned narrow. I collapsed on the floor. I could see her watching me from near the hallway, going towards the stairs. The adrenaline wore off and I thought this would be the end of me. I looked back at memories from when my parents were still happy with each other. I tried to imagine my dad telling me not to worry. Everything went dark for a while. I woke up a few hours later on the same couch. This time she was here, hugging me. What the hell, Ava? She didn't answer. She was still smiling. I sat up, moving away from her. As I did, I felt a lot of pain. I forgot about the stabbing. She stood up and came in front of me. She looked as if she had been crying for a while. The warmth I felt near her has been replaced by fear and dread. Did you like being with me? What was that for? Why did you stab me? Did you like being with me? I asked a few more questions to no avail, so I answered her question. Yeah, I used to, until you almost killed me. That's it. The faint smile on her face grew wider, but this time it was too wide, stretching to her cheekbones, and almost suddenly, her creepy smile turned into a grimace. Her stare stung me with sharp pain. She screamed impossibly. It was shrill, but there was a deep growling quality to it. I couldn't process it anymore, so I just stayed frozen. Any slight movement sent pain similar to an electric shock throughout my body. After what seemed like hours, she stopped screaming and started to talk in her usual manner, but it lacked warmth and friendliness. But I could trace a bit of sympathy in her voice as she spoke. Her gaze was too painful for me to bear. James, you must have many questions now, but listen to me carefully as I don't have much time. Please don't interrupt me. Believe in what I say and remember every detail of it. Trust me, it will help you in the long run. I tried to make sense of everything, but honestly, everything felt surreal, as if it was a nightmare. But I focused on everything she said because I didn't really have much of a choice now. I am stuck in a cycle of surviving on others' happiness. That's what keeps me alive. I make people happy, and I steal their happiness. If I don't do that, there will be consequences. People close to you will die. Stealing their happiness will cause them to die internally when they're not around me and cause everyone else to hate them. I will be the only person who provides them with happiness and a feeling of safety. I had to kill 100 people to break free. You are the 100th one, James. You have to carry my lifestyle. Let me get straight into this. You don't need food or water to be alive, and you can't kill yourself to escape this torture. When one of your victims' happiness runs out, they just fade out of existence. Their family will know that they existed, but they won't remember their name or appearance. You have to stab your 100th person, and while they're out, recite the phrase. I've written everything out for you just in case I won't finish telling you this. She managed to tell me weakly. I didn't want to believe her, but this explained the date night. I have never seen her eat nor drink anything. She disappeared at school lunch. Most of all, her friends, the worshippers. I knew a lot of them, but when I think of their names and their appearance, but as I do so, their memory becomes even more distant than it was before. I couldn't ask any other questions. She had a blank expression on her face. She handed me the paper. As I opened the paper, I caught her fading into the space. A few seconds later, it was as if she was never there before. I was seriously considering that this was a hallucination, but I can't explain the blood on my shirt and the letter in my hand. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I wasn't myself. My brown hair went to a dirty blonde. My brown eyes went to a deep blue. I was taller than usual, and my scrawny and thin body had a bit of muscle. Not too much, just enough to be attractive. When I looked at my face, I freaked out. I had a smile. I can't stop smiling. I reached my hand to my abdomen to find that the place she stabbed me had healed, leaving a scar. I went back to the living room to read the phrase I had to tell. You shall have to pay for happiness with your smile. That wasn't a long time ago. Everyone from my town forgot me. I took on a new identity and moved to a big city. Everything she said was true. Couldn't off myself, didn't have to eat, and I couldn't stop smiling. It physically hurts to smile, but she forgot to tell me that I can't sleep. But now I'm questioning whether it's because of the curse or because of my guilt. There's a large number of people, worshippers, around my house now. They don't behave like themselves. They slowly lose themselves, but I always try to be patient with them. It turns out that my victim causes me to look different. If my victim likes a girl, I'll morph into a girl, and I have no control over it. I can trap one person at a time, and I've noticed that people are starting to like me. It would have been a dream come true for my former self, but I despise every second of living like this. I've trapped 87 people until now. 87 people faded out of existence. I kept writing their names and clicking photos of them, but the evidence always found a way to disappear. Photos get deleted, and the books where I write their names are lost. My memory of them vague. I couldn't bear to deal with this secret all by myself, so I turned to Reddit in order to share this with people. So if you ever find yourself with a person who seems to love you and care about you, with their eyes reaching the depths of your soul telling you that it's okay and they understand you, remember that you might as well be talking with me. You'll never know. Not until it's too late. So I'll give you some advice. Whatever happens, don't smile. Do not smile at me.